All right, when you start the next assignment, our next assignment is going to be page transitions. I mentioned last class you can start sketching page transitions. 5 page transitions will be used for other assignments throughout. So our last assignment will be a demo reel. You'll have your title card, you'll have a transition, you'll have your first piece, you'll have a transition, you'll have your second piece, a transition, your third piece, and so on. These are the transitions we're going to use for that assignment, okay? So when you do these, just consider that the first couple are going to be crap, the later ones will be better, okay? So by the time you're done, you should be able to create a transition within like 3 to 5 minutes, okay? That's how quickly you'll get it, understanding how to do these and being able to do them. The more you do, the faster you're going to get. So your first step in this is to copy your template, paste it, and then call it page transition. And then go into your template file and call that page transition. And then open it up, and that's where you'll start working. I already have one started, so I'm not going to go that way. Okay, so I'm going to show a couple examples, and then I'm just going to let you work, and you'll see how it's basically the same thing we were doing. It's just doing it for a different reason, okay, with a different purpose. So here's just a simple one, okay? So remember, the idea is nothing is on the screen, something's on the screen and covers it, and then nothing's on the screen again. Oops, turn that off. So, play. There we go. So nothing's on the screen, something's on the screen, nothing's on the screen, okay? These transitions will last roughly, well, let's say no more than 2 seconds for a very involved one. This one, if you look at it, lasts less than a minute or a second and a half, okay? And this is a pretty simple one. It's gorgeous. Notice how well just adding motion blur to something like this really helps kind of pull off the motion a little bit smoother than if there's no motion blur on it. Okay, and there's no motion blur on that. So this one seems a little bit jerkier. The motion blur seems a little bit smoother. Okay, here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. And there's that arc one. Here's a triangle one. Oops, not that one. This one. Okay. The theme is the same in each one of these. It covers the screen and then goes away. It covers the screen and then goes away. If it doesn't cover the screen, it doesn't work. Okay. If this were to stop here, and I'm going from one picture to another, there's going to be a blip in the center of that, where one picture is just going to disappear and another picture is going to pop up. Okay. Fading from one picture to the other is not an acceptable way to transition when you do something in motion graphics. Some cases, yes. Most cases, no. Okay. Like that is it's more exciting. It's more like fun. All right, cool. So let me show you a couple examples of how I would do these, and then I'll let you work on these. So I'm going to do, I don't need to project it. I'll do this like triangle one here, okay, so we can see how I would do that. Looking at how you would do these, I don't need to go into After Effects and draw out all of this first because I already have it. I already know what it's going to look like. I should then start thinking about how I want to animate it before I start working in After Effects because that's what's going to kind of dictate it. So with this one here, I have to decide how I want each one of these pieces to come in. Am I scaling it up? Am I rotating it in? Am I just moving it in? Okay? So let's say, for the sake of it, that I'm just going to move these in. Simple, straightforward. So I'm going to go to my layers, I'm going to go to new, and I'm going to go to solid. And I'll pick a color. That's a great color. I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees and scoot this over and like that. And I think 50 degrees might be better. So I'm trying to line this up. That's not enough. So 47. So I'm trying to line this up with this bottom corner here and the top of that. 48, close enough. Okay, I can probably scoot it over just a hair. All right, so now I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to rotate it negative 48 degrees. Scoot that over here. There we go. I'm going to duplicate this again. I'm going to rotate it like so. And then scoot this down here. And then duplicate that one, and then just scoot that down there. Control D. Okay, so that gives me basically that hole in the center. Okay. Let me just give these some different colors so that everything doesn't look the same. The colors I'm usually kind of least concerned about until the end, and then I'll come back and color it how I want to color it. As long as I have enough values here that I can look at it and see the difference between each piece, it's easier for me to kind of see what's happening. Also, I want to play with stacking order. How each of these layers are stacked is going to depend on how that shows up. Okay, so if I had this dark gray one right there, you'll see how it's now tucked behind that one. Again, it'll kind of play off how I want to animate these things as to how these come in. So that's fine the way that is. So I'm going to go up to, let's say, 15 frames. I'm going to set a position keyframe. I'm going to scoot back, and then I'm just going to move each one of these off. There we go. So this is a boring way to do it. We'll do it a more exciting way in a second. I'm going to easy ease these. I'm going to go to the graph editor. I'm going to make sure I'm on the speed graph, and then just adjust the speed on these. There we go. So it's going to go faster right at the beginning. Super. All right, so everything zips in like this. Does it cover the screen? No. Still a hole in the center, right? So I have to think about what I want to do for that. So if these come in like this, maybe I'll just have another screen just kind of pop up in the center in the background. It's acceptable. You really get, it's more of just like, let's make something and see what happens. Maybe we'll make this white. Make sure it's on the bottom. And then we'll set a keyframe. So once these come in like this, then that one will pop in. So I'm going to set a keyframe here. Oops. Pull that down. So easy ease, graph editor, speed happens in this case at the beginning. And the only reason I'm doing it at the beginning, I like the little slowness that happens, right? So it kind of goes whoosh, and like slowly sets in position, and then it'll zip out again. Okay, so I like to have that kind of effect for these. Oops. And my starting point needs to be a little bit lower. There we go. Cool. So maybe this could happen a little bit faster. There we go. Maybe a little bit sooner. Yep, that looks good. Okay. So now my screen is covered. So now I need to get this off the screen so that whatever's behind it can actually be revealed. So again, I kind of debate, how do I want this to go off the screen? I could scale it, move it, rotate it, whatever. Just because this is the boring one, I'm just going to do position again. So I open my position, I click my little diamonds, I scoot up a little bit, and then I'm just going to move these across. That happens a bit too quick. Let's scoot that over a little bit more. And scoot this over a little bit more. There we go. So it comes in, and then disappears like that. Okay, if I don't like something at this point, I can definitely go back and fix it, tweak it, modify it, whatever. This is the part that's going to make it look a little bit fancier, is I'm just going to go through and just offset each one of these so that they're not all stacked and all doing the same exact thing at the same exact time, just like we did in our title cards. So I'm just going to scoot this one a couple of frames over, scoot this one a couple frames over, scoot this one a couple frames over. So now that looks a little bit more exciting. Okay, we'll even throw a motion blur on here so we can see what that looks like. Glorious. All right, so now let's see what we would do with something like this. Okay, I'm going to grab a solid, and I'm just going to drop a grid on this one. There we go. And I'll duplicate the solid, I'll delete the grid, and I'll put a different item on this. No, not radio waves. Maybe radio waves. That might be cool. No, not radio waves. I guess we'll just do lightning. Never use the lightning in After Effects, by the way. Very rare instances you use lightning. Okay, so I need to get from my grid to my lightning without making it look stupid. I'm going to turn off my transition just so we can see what it's going to look like. Here is my grid. So I have grid, grid, grid. Then I want the lightning to come on. Okay, so I want something that's going to cover up the grid, hide the grid, and then show the lightning so that it's a little bit easier to see. If I faded one off, faded one on, not very exciting. So what I'm going to do is scoot this lightning down further. I'm going to turn on my page transition, put both of these below it, and then I'm just going to offset the page transition to about here. And then this will be right there. Yep, okay. So here it is. My page transition comes on, covers up the grid. Right here where it's covering the grid, I'm going to Alt right bracket that so it cuts it, and then bring in the lightning. So now when this goes away, you'll see the grid is gone and the lightning is there. So there's the grid. Now we have lightning. So it's a very easy cover up, and then it reveals what's behind it. Okay? You will not have to do the bottom part. You don't have to put an image in there. Your job is simply to create the transition that eventually will be used for that kind of thing. Okay? So let's drop this back in here. All right. So that one's done. Let me rename this so I know what it's called. This will be page transition. You can just put PT and iris, wipe, final. For some of these, you may have several compositions that go into creating one. When I did this triangle, I didn't want to animate one triangle or a bunch of triangles individually. So what I did was I animated one triangle and used that same animation over and over and over again for all the other pieces. So here's the animation for all of those. Okay. Now I take that and I duplicate it, and there it is. Okay. So that's why I want to know which one's the final one, because I may have some that are not used for other stuff. All right, so now let's do one that's a little bit more exciting looking. Page transition. Wipe. Horizontal wipe. I make all of these about 5 seconds long. Same settings, 960, 540, 30 frames a second. I make it 5 seconds, but I will cut it to exactly how long it is. The first one I don't care about. This one I do. I'm going to make a solid. Let's call this a stripe. And what I think I'm going to do is have this go from the center out. So it's going to scale out and then scale up and then scale in and then scale down to nothing. Okay, kind of like a weird shape, but that'll work. So I'm going to go to the beginning. I'm going to unlock my chain here and set this to 0. I'm going to set a key, scoot up a little bit, set this to 100. So now I just have this. Okay, then I'm going to scoot up maybe a frame or two, set another keyframe, scoot up a couple frames, scale this up to 100 there, scoot up a couple keyframes, set a key, scoot up a bit, wrong one, scale this in, scoot up a couple keyframes, set a key, scoot up a bit, and set that to 0. Okay, so this is a bit more something happening. Okay, so it does the same thing. It accomplishes the exact same task, right? It basically covers the screen right here. So something could be behind it. That's where I do my cut. And then when it swipes down, there's the item behind it. Okay, these still need to be easy eased. Still need to go into the graph editor and tweak this. That's why it's nice to have 2 screens. There we go. Whoops. You can close the ones you're not using. That's what I should do. That one I'm not using, this one I'm not using, that one. Okay. There we go. So that's pretty cool. Now, I can take that same thing and make it just a tad bit fancier. Number one, this is, I just want to check the time. So this is shortly before 2 seconds. I think I want to just bunch these a little bit closer together so that it goes a little bit quicker. So I have time to do that I want to do in the other one. Yep, that's cool. All right, so now I'm going to take this and duplicate it 5 times. 3 times is good, 5 times is good, definitely not any more than that. Okay, if you did 7 or 10 or whatever, it's way too much. And also odd numbers work, don't use even numbers. So I'm going to offset each one of these like 2 frames. And then I'm going to go through and change the colors on each one. There we go. So now if we watch it, so now we get this kind of like repetitive, like echoing kind of effect with it because the first one goes, and as the first one's going, then the second one's going, then the third one's going, then the fourth one's going. And they're all kind of like following each other. Now where that stops is right here. So notice at the beginning that they all do that. They all go, you know, the white happens first, then the gray, and then the darker grays. And then the white gets bigger, and all the grays get bigger. But then once we hit this point, all the other animation is just kind of like gone. Okay? Any guesses as to why it's gone? Yep. Yep, they're all happening before it, and that darker screen is on top, right? So what we should have is they expand, and then the darker screen goes away first, and then we can see all the other ones kind of following along with it, okay? So this is an acceptable animation where you could have just that top screen is the last one there and it just goes away. Or let me hit U on here so I can see this. These keyframes here are the one that's going to control it collapsing and bringing in. So if you look at it, oops, not there, right here, these ones. There. These ones here are controlling the collapsing. So if I were to take these collapsings and scoot them so they happen after that one. And the same thing here. And the same thing here. And the same thing, whoopsie, there. Right? So now we get the same effect at the beginning and the same effect at the end. And if I turn on motion blur, then we get a pretty cool looking effect. Okay, it covers the task, covers the screen, we're good, and then we can move on. All right, so my animation ends about here. So I'm going to shorten this work area so it happens right about there. I'm going to trim my comp, and then I'm going to go up here, rename it, and call it final. Drop it into my comps. Then I'll make another one, and then see what I'm going to do here. Let's go to another solid. Let's put our pivot in the corner. This one I'm going to rotate it like this. It's going to be shrunk down, so it's going to rotate and then scale up. Okay? So I'm going to scale it like that. And then I'm going to rotate it down. So I set a key, scoot up a little bit, set that to 0. I turn my scale on, I set a key for that. I scale this up to that much. Boop, boop. Okay, if I want a little bit of an offset between them, sometimes you may want an offset so that it hits, there's a pause, and then it scoots up. I'm just going to move these scale keyframes down a notch. Okay, so it goes do, 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 do. If I move them back the other way, so what happens before it, it'll actually start to scale up before it hits the ground. That's too much. Let me go one more frame. So now it feels like the second it hits that, it's kind of scaling up at the same time. If I go further, it'll be more apparent. Okay, so play with the positioning of your keyframes because you may find like, oh, it looks better here or there or whatever. And let's see. I want my speed to be faster on the beginning of the, or the end of this rotates, so that will happen like this. And then with the scaling, let's do the speed at the beginning. There we go. All right, let's see what it looks like with the speed at the end. There we go. I like that. Cool. All right, so I could duplicate these at this point and then have, just like I did in the other one, have an array of these where they just kind of all follow and stack on top of each other. But I want to also consider how it's going to go out at the end, right? So let's just say that I have the position just move up. So it goes, and then the position moves, come on, up like that. There we go. I like it. All right, so now duplicate, and then I'll change my colors. never offset them. So let's give these a couple frames offset. Okay, motion blur on. Whoops. That looks cool. Okay, now I'll also show you this other thing. So both of these that I just did, I colored gray. So I'm going to go under my effects. I'm going to go to color correction, and I'm going to go to hue and saturation. Let me go to where I can see that one. I think this is the top one, so he should be right there. So that should be him. Yes. Okay. So if I go here and I say colorize, it's going to colorize that gray value. Okay. And if I change the hue, you can see I can obviously change the hue just like I was doing on my title card. Now, because I did this to one layer, I could copy this effect and paste it to all the other layers, but that's kind of like a bad way to work. Okay. It's too much for me to screw up or have to change if I want to come back and change anything. So just like Photoshop, there's adjustment layers that you would use in Photoshop that if you have an adjustment layer, everything underneath it gets affected. So in After Effects, the same thing happens. So if I make an adjustment layer, then add the hue and saturation, when I colorize this, it will colorize all of the shapes, not just that top one. And because they're all different shades of gray, then it'll automatically shade each one so that they still look different. If they were all medium gray, it would all look the same. If they were all white or black or whatever, it would all look the same. So now I can adjust the coloring, I can adjust the saturation on them, I can adjust the lightness. There we go. And then basically change the entire thing. So you could do, obviously, exact colors. I want this one to be red, blue, green, yellow, whatever. Or I can do them as grays and then adjust the colors later. The cool thing about doing that kind of thing is that you're able to change how you transition from one animation to another animation. So as you're inside After Effects and you're starting to work on these, don't be too concerned about whether it looks fantastic yet. You'll get there. Just be concerned with creating some kind of neat design of how it gets on here, how it covers the screen, and then how it goes away. Okay? Think about scale, rotate, and position. Those are typically the three things that you're going to be dealing with. If you're going to scale it, look where the anchor point is. Look where it's scaling from. Maybe you want to scale it from a corner. Maybe you want to scale it from the center. Maybe you want to scale it from somewhere else. Maybe you want to have it rotate in and then scale up and then position off or whatever. Okay? All the ones that I have here, they're done the exact same way. This is the one that I showed before, but I just animated the position. All of these ones are done animating the scale. So I put their pivot right in the corner, and then I animated them scaling up, and it gives me that look. And then as they rotate, like this, and then they fall. But you'll see only the top one falls, the ones behind it don't fall. So it scales, rotates, and then falls. And there's even some offset between all of them, so they all don't happen at the exact same time. So you'll see where these frames, this is where it's perfectly out, are offset. All of these ones are lined up, so they all happen at the same time there, and then this end one just falls. We're still using Easy Ease. 90% of your keyframes should be easy eased, especially right now. Everything should have the graph editor, at least going into it and tweaking it. These ones, same thing. I just scaled it and then rotated them. That's all they are, just scaled out and rotated. These ones is just, don't worry about that one yet. That's the one I already showed. This one is just move, position, and rotate. These ones are just scaled from the center and then fall down. Scale from the center and fall down. And these ones are position, so they fall down. And then they all rotate and scale at the same time. Okay? So think of different ways. Again, you can kind of creatively get them on the screen, creatively get them to go away, and so on. Questions on that yet? Yes, sir. You're going to make 5 different ones. The ones you create today will be the practice ones. When you come in Monday, I'll show some other stuff that you can use to add to those, and probably in an hour on Monday, you'd be able to create all 5 of them. Okay? Anything else? All right.